Hey Eugene, can you give me a heads up if it goes through? All right, let's try this one more time. I think this is working now. I'm just going to get a confirmation. But welcome back. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. This is going to be the third installment on a still life painting that I've been doing in oil. It's a 16 by 20, and my goal in this is just to kind of talk you through the process and demystify oil painting if I can, and hopefully inspire you to create some artwork of your own. So please feel free to ask me. Hmm, maybe it's not working. Well, this is just. This is weird. I've done it like twice and it's just not working. Maybe it is working. Mm-mm. Yay, it's working. Okay, great. There is significant delay. If you experience a significant delay or if something is amiss, let me know. Hmm. Okay, we are back. And here we go. So, getting into a painting, especially if you haven't worked on it for a moment, it's a dry painting. I highly recommend. We're going to take out our clean turp that is settled to the bottom. If you can see my palette, of course, my palette feed is somehow frozen. So, give me one more minute to. Hmm. Today is a strange day for technology once again. Um, I'm just trying to get my palette feed up, and we're going to say hi again momentarily upside down. All right, there we go. Should be working. I had to switch it to something, and that was the only option. So, yeah, we're good. Finally, painting time. All right. So a little bit of turp is on my palette, and I'm going to draw into this. This is a very like magenta-based painting. Um, that's a nice transparent color. Here's a little ultramarine blue, also a lovely transparent color. But maybe I want to add a little bit of this burnt sienna just to give it like a more earthy tone. And then let's see, I might even want to neutralize it slightly more. That's such an orangey color, that color you can see as it spreads out on the glass palette. So, oh, all video feeds frozen. Ha ha ha. Let's see. Nope, I got my arm. And those are the only two. So I think we're in good shape. But thank you so much for checking on that. Goodness knows I would walk into that one in a few minutes, and it better be taken care of earlier. All right, so we should be okay. And I have this little drawing mixture of transparent paint, and I'm just going to sort of take a second to see what is it in the still life that I still want to add some definition to with a darker value. And, I know that there's lots of places, but I want to really strategize a little bit and think about where first. One of the places I'm going to try, I think, is over here. I want to complete that sense of the ellipse, kind of Dive right into that. I want to address the shadow shape in this bottle, because it's a really big directional element on that side of the canvas. It's like it has to balance, and I see this like reddish brown shape. And then let's maybe see if we can sneak a little of that as a glaze over the top of that teal. It's just an orange and blue thing. It's really a nice little way to deepen a color that is blue and take like something that is essentially a very dark orange. And I'm just going through and like, it feels like I'm just carving out a little more depth. And at the same time, if you notice, I'm sort of working like one side of the canvas to the other. I'm also like reestablishing and strengthening the dark shape that runs through the whole thing. Because honestly, I think that's probably the most important thing I can do at this stage of the painting. We don't want this dark shape to be arbitrary. It's very important. So, you know, this is the time to kind of play around with just how far out can I take it, you know? I mean, I really want to push the limits of like how established and distinct the dark shape can be. I think that's what I've been considering anyways. Recently did a plein air painting festival in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. And that is one thing that I really noticed was the success of paintings really hinges on the dark shape. Another artist was saying to me that he at one point took a class and it was in this really large auditorium space and the watercolor class, and they would take out their paintings at the end and put them on this stage and then sit far back from it. And you could tell from far away which ones were the successful paintings because they had a really clear dark shape. And so I think I'm trying to learn that lesson. It's a great color to like reestablish a little form in some of these branches, which are just marks, you know, right now. Not much is happening there except for some pretty wild marks. So this can start to get, you know, the painting a little bit more solidified, and you start to see what's shadow and what's branch, and you really have to start making some of these decisions too, which is fun. If you like that kind of thing. Now, I think I'm going to shift this a little bit more magenta because at this time I can see I might be able to like shift it into almost like the shadow color from past shadows from these little Cynthia flowers. And, you know, I'm pretty careful, like even with a loose painting, these marks were created in a really loose way. And there might be a little brush flourish that I'm using to kind of get like a certain edge or a certain blend or a little bit of a emphasis change with the mark. But generally, I think that, you know, you're very careful with those loose marks to maintain them, the ones that work, and to make good ones in the first place. Because isn't that always the thing that you wanted to figure out? I always did. Like, how are those beautiful loose paintings so effortless looking, you know? People would always say, like, oh, well, it's practice. It's all this practice. You have to draw forever and understand it forever. And Maybe that's true ultimately. I don't know. I'm still trying to find it, but I do think more and more that it's like preserving early marks is the key to kind of making something in that direction of like being loose and also being descriptive, being somewhat accurate. It's such a balance to pull off. So I'm just kind of playing around with this little drawing color. Like I said, I think it's a bit blue in that shadow area. This color is a bit dark. I think I am going to have to probably mix up something with some opacity, kind of like really hit the color that I need. But I don't know. I have the sense that I think I want to keep going for just a little bit with this like glazing situation. Think bigger, think like about the large value shapes. I'm kind of feeling just like slightly wary of going in with opaque paint this early. All right, so I won't. Let's see what else I can get done with the transparent. Now, the reason I do that is it's much easier to paint into this thin transparent than it is into an opaque. And I certainly want to give myself as many marks that can be like options for this like loose descriptive stuff. I've read that one. Wow. All right, let's try it. Okay. Now I think I'm gonna do more of that. Whenever something works, do more. And I think I might go a little more sienna in the color. Let's see. At least for this layer, because if I do this very like orangey, and it is, it's like a really glazy, orangey, transparent. It's very pretty. You can see the canvas through it, at least where I'm standing. I hope you can on camera or film or video or whatever this is. But I'm thinking this leaves me more possibilities. It leaves the surface a little bit more open so that some of these like little warm marks show through. The early purple underpainting might show through. Yeah, I do think I was not quite at the place to move into opaque paint. And I don't really have too much of a goal for this one to see how many, sessions I get this done in. I think I'll just keep working on it until I think that it's not useful to work on anymore. And then I will stop working on it. So, anyway, still working transparently. I'm balancing this kind of purpley color. I see some of it, but I want to have some variety. And this variety in temperature and in like hue is just very interesting. And you can play these colors around your picture. So if you ever have, the even just the inkling that like, oh, maybe that's the same color over here, just allow a little mark of that color to just dash through someplace else. And just that's a great way to practice like breaking up edges and harmonizing your color. And let's see, what else is it a good way to practice? Little fearlessness with the paintbrush. You can kind of make these different light marks. Really fun. This is really, I think what most people kind of think of when they think of painting is just marks and being really free and loose and just kind of painting. But in reality, when you get into it, you do have to approach from a really logical place. And so I'm not doing this like in a vacuum. It's not just marks on the canvas and we'll see what happens. This still is part of the plan. And the plan is we got to take this from very general to more and more specific. So I'm not settling down on any one thing yet. I'm still, really squinting my eyes, looking for the big picture, and making some decisions now that are a little bit more specific as I darken behind some of these flower shapes. But, I'm not really lingering in one area and getting into a ton of detail. Oh, I see some green that I attempted to put in. I'm a total fan of that green color. I think that green color might have to go. So, might even put in a few more flowers momentarily. I think that might be next on the agenda. I'm just trying to kind of like really take the glazing as far as I can. It's so effective. It produces so many more interesting little paint artifacts that you can kind of work into other things. I think it can really harmonize your colors too. And so as you're working, you can kind of think about like, what is a nice shared note of color between all of these areas or between several of the areas, right? So we have that kind of shape of that color and just even strengthening that shape of color, it really does become a compositional moment as well. Like as you build up that dark shape, it changes the composition. So that's why I'm moving quite a bit around with it, because all of these little accents of dark, I don't want to build them up too much in one place. That place would just get really heavy and kind of sink down in terms of the composition. So I'm trying just to kind of see it as a whole. Oh, here's a place where I can definitely work a little bit into that transparent area. We are now in the blues. So here's some ultramarine blue. Grabbed a little bit of sap, but really I think it's more gradient. And we're just going to kind of darken deep in the space, but also again thinking about like how that creates like a little line or pathway. And those pathways are just natural parts of the composition. So you definitely want to carefully consider where these little dark shapes are leading. All right. Really fun idea to get some pattern into your still lives. And people often are, I want to say like confused by, but it's overwhelming to think about how to render pattern as you're painting form. And I remember very specifically being told that the form is the first thing to consider and the first thing to kind of render. So that's what we'll be focusing on here. But as you can see, I've definitely like started the mark making process already. And I want those marks to like become eventually some sort of indicated pattern, not necessarily like a specific pattern. That's what I sort of like to see. I don't love to and do actually. I mean, I could see another artist really painting a very specific pattern in a way that I might find really, fabulous, but it's not something that I am drawn to create. So for me, I like that indication of pattern and indication of something specific without actually being specific. And that's what I think is so interesting I just found myself with the right color, and I'm now kind of just beginning to work a little bit opaquely on this shape, adding a few little tendrils to that. And also I think that'll be a little bit more clear about what it is. What is it exactly? But I love how it works with this cloth back here, and also how it sort of like interrupts the pattern and maybe is very confusing. And I think that's so interesting. So we're going to try to make sense of that. Now I want to get a little tiny brush because as I'm rendering this out, I do feel like I could maybe make a mark or two. A little more drawing like, a little more specific. I'm not thinking so much about the dark shape anymore or at all. Now I'm kind of thinking about the colors that are on the light side of this little blossom here. Also how absolutely wretched and unacceptable that brush is going to be. Finding the right brush for a little mark like that is so important. So stand by for 1 second while I see what I can see. All right, here we go. A little like flat brush, I think, is a better choice. Pretty definite mark. It's not really going to go many places after I put it on. So kind of a once and done, or maybe twice, or maybe 3 times at the most, but like absolutely no more than 5 times. Ooh, that was fun. Fun when it works. So I just wanted this to like turn a little bit, you know? There. Finishing mark in a few places, and I'll probably just like paint around it. So much fun. That one will need something else, but that's okay. Nice place to put a light for no reason. Could vary this color just a little bit. I see just a tiny bit of yellow places, especially that center. All right, I'm going to load up this brush with a little more blue. And this is like a teal, cobalt teal, which is a really lovely color. And honestly, such a good substitute for cerulean blue, frankly. I'm sorry, cerulean blue fans. It just is. It's just stronger, and you can basically do everything that you could do with cerulean. All right, I'm going to leave that little unpainted stem, kind of focus on painting my way out of this shape. And as it turns out, I've moved into opaque colors. So here we are, opaque color world. And that just means we're adding thicker paint. We're adding white to the paint. It is not as transparent. It's just, it's more thickly applied. And so you're not going to have as easy a time painting over it. You can paint over it. And you can paint over it with great success and achieve really wonderful effects. So even the difficult parts of oil painting can be its strength. Remember, I put those darks in earlier around these little yellow berry situations. And so I'm getting like this little blend between them that I like. Gives it a little more realism. Too light. And I don't want to finish the entirety of this area for all time and forever right now. I just want to kind of layer it up a little bit and then move along and do the same to everything. That's the goal. Okay, so this is, I'll be back. And so I don't have to do every single thing right now. We want to keep it at like a level a little bit advanced. We don't have to go all the way to the finish line here. We can come back. We'll circle back. Here we are, circling back. So as long as I have these colors, let's see, and we're in this area, I think we're going to see a little bit of that blue through our bottle, and I do detect it reflecting some of that like teal, a little bit teal. And in terms of like the process, I think that one could really just slow this all down a bit if you wanted to. Each area just still kind of applied to the same degree before we move back around and finish things. You could just go a little bit more slowly, but still have that same sort of pacing in mind where like nothing is truly finished. You're just advancing it at each pass. All right, let's stand back. Let's see what the biggest issues are, biggest items, anything lagging, anything truly getting kind of left behind or urgent. There's always something urgent, isn't there? I do feel like if I'm going to put in any more for Cynthia flowers, I want to do that now. And I think I'd like to. So I'm going to just clean off this little brush. This area is only wet with transparent thin paint. It barely even comes off the canvas. So all of that stuff is totally easy to work with, easy to paint into. I didn't put it everywhere. Of course, it's going to be even easier to paint onto a totally dry surface, but it's not bad to work into at all. So we're going to get some pretty bright yellow, and then I want to make a little like gradient into a yellow purple mixture. So knowing those complementary colors, it's a good starting point for where we find our shadow colors. And I added a little bit of purple to this yellow, and this is what I got. It's a very convincing shadow color. However, you could even split that up. There's got to be a greener version of it, maybe. Maybe we have a more orangey version. And now with these two colors, either one would work as a shadow, but they're more interesting. Maybe even, dare I say, a little magenta. And let's lighten it up so that we can see it a bit. Okay, I think that's a nice little variation. So I started just with yellow purple, like out of the textbook, purple and yellow are opposites. If you want to mix a shadow color, it's pretty convenient. Go ahead and mix purple and yellow. However, you can absolutely take that mixture and then split it because we've got a more reddish color. Purple's got red in it. We have, so you're just taking some of those ingredients and making it a little bit more varied. And that color just absolutely fits directly into what I've already painted because it's made with purple and yellow as its basis, right? I'm going a little bit darker because I want to. I need a darker value to sink back, but it's the same color scheme. I just grabbed like a little, oh wow, that was a lucky brush stroke. Woohoo! Better than going to a slot machine. So, like sometimes your brush will just be loaded up in such a way and you just kind of make a mark and then all of a sudden it's just pretty descriptive. You don't really need to do that much to it. That's fun. And I think that happens quite a bit with oil, but also like with watercolor. I think watercolor has all sorts of, looking at like just random occurrences and creating beautiful moments for them, you know? Because you do have to identify when something is working as a whatever, and then you have to emphasize it. Hope that makes sense. But these marks have a lot of character, and as you're sort of observing whatever it is, think about like the character of the thing that you're painting, even if you're not totally sure how to like express that character. Just thinking about it and letting your mark kind of just be whatever it is usually the best way to go. Here I am, quote unquote, adding more, but really just reinforcing the ones I already have. Maybe I just really like the ones I have. I don't need more, but I think I do need more. All right. Inner struggles of like two parts of my brain. All right. Yeah, I do want it to be a little bit more full, but I don't want to crush that sense of like depth and space that I'm getting in here. I'm gonna make these look somewhat natural and not take away, but oof. Be existing a little bit more on a branch would be in its best interest. What's that purple? And it's so, I'm just avoiding, Really does. Painting makes you kind of look like, what am I not addressing here? Good stuff. So I'm noticing that I have a little bit of like an underdone area that's forming behind some of these blossoms that has this like purple underpainting color, and it's not quite up to the rest of it. And it's one of these things that I almost didn't like want to see, but I see it now. Let's fix it up. All right. Might be too dark. I'm going to go a little bit lighter. Light pile, because it's got all the right ingredients. And it's right there. All right, here we go. Let's see if this is any better. Yes. All right. A little bit more red. All right, I think that should do it. All right, I finally really like it. I think I need a few variations of it, but at least for some of these areas, that is definitely resolving this unpainted kind of questionable area that isn't developing quite at the same speed. I need to pause and just get that up to speed. And that's really the case about, following that process is like make sure that you are not leaving areas behind because they look strange when they're caught up later. They don't look like they were part of the whole, situation from the start. And so to keep things cohesive, I think, and to really be a little bit less, just less effort too. I really do recommend like keep working around. Don't let areas like fall by the wayside and not keep developing with everything. Mm-hmm. All right, so we've done some fixing, we've done some solidifying. I think it's kind of coming together. I can see the direction. I'm going to step back from it in a moment, which is always the move. Any questions? Step back from the painting. It's a really good way to make sure that you like where it's headed. You might think you do. Step back and see. Okay, so far I like it. This is still an area of note, let's say. There's more that we can do here. I think that it's got to be in layers. When it's overwhelming, when there's a lot happening, or when things are subtle, just let it dry. Do a little layering. In some places, this color is lighter than what I had. In some places, it's a little darker, but I do think overall it's kind of unifying. And I am happy with that result. I think that's what it really needed. I think I could use just a bit of variation. So I will go a little more purple by this beautiful yellow on the pear because purple is going to make that really, really cook. So that edge is horribly sharp and we're going to have to fix that as soon as possible. Very, very unfortunate. Only I would have flicked that paint a little more softly along that edge. You know what we could do though? A little terp, a little yellow on the brush. And this is just to show you, like, you could do a lot with edges. Even that softening makes it feel more three-dimensional to me. It was just like all of a sudden it just totally flattened out when that edge went really sharply against it. For me, at least that's what I was seeing. Somebody out there might have said that was my favorite edge of the entire painting. But I don't think so. And now I have this like little blendy area. And now I'm kind of going in there with a softer edge. And I'm going to establish a little mark that hopefully will make things feel level and grounded. All right, let's get into a quick palette knife mix of the opaque colors on the tabletop. And let me know if you have any questions about any of this along the way. Just talking and talking, and I'll keep doing so unless anybody has any specifics I should talk about. I'll just tell you what I'm thinking, tell you what I'm doing. I have see, probably 2 quinacridone colors, and I think only one on my palette. So I'm just going to check out and see if I have everything that I actually need for this color. Yeah. Oh no, I do have 2. It's a cadmium that I'm missing. And so when you are setting up your palette, there are really only so many colors that you're absolutely going to need. And you can try a limited palette too. But if you're using what we refer to as a full palette, you're going to want to think about having at least 2 of each of the primary colors, which are red, yellow, and blue in my book. I'm just thinking about them that way. No shade to the people that developed their ideas about magenta in recent weeks and months. I just feel like this is what I'm calling red, right? Magenta's in there. It's just I need a magenta, I need a fire red, I need something that's really warm. So this is the range that we're looking for. For each primary color or color family, we really want at least 2, because that will give us something hopefully warm, something cool. That way you have a larger range of colors that this can mix. So thinking about it that way, you don't have to have specific color names per se, because you could plug different colors into your cool yellow on your palette, right? It could be cadmium yellow light. It could be cadmium yellow lemon or lemon yellow. Any of those are going to be fine. It's just what they do. They'll do something sort of similar. So you'll get a sense of what they're going to do. But they each have a little specific flavor. So it's really your personal choice, but you can use just about any cool yellow as your cool yellow. So here we go. I think this is a good start for, yeah, I like it. I do want a little bit more warmth someplace. I'm going to throw in some cadmium yellow medium. And then I think I'm going to throw in a little sienna, burnt sienna. So now I have like an orangier version of this pink. That is pink and orange at the same time as a color can be. And I think it's going to look pretty good back here. See what happens. Now for this, I'm going to squeeze out, instead of using the turp, I'm going to use this little medium bottle, which is just a mixture of our terp or our Gamsol, our odorless mineral spirits, and that's mixed with linseed oil. So it has a little bit more of like a slick quality. It's a little heavier. It's not thin. Spice up a few places. Lighter pink. I feel like variation is what is calling me right now. And you can put paint on in so many different ways. You can put it on where I have some like dry canvas showing through. I can really lay the brush down and push really hard with the brush. And you're going to get a much like more sort of classic paint brush stroke mark, if you will, when you look at that surface. So, you know, you can always sort of build it up. It's easier to start thin and then put on your thicker marks as you go. And I'm just mixing a little bit of a variation. Not sure if I'm going to like the variation, but I want something a little bit more like purpley. So I went with the quinacridone magenta and the teal, cobalt teal. I think it's kind of a little too muted though. I'm not loving it. I'm going to red it up a little bit with the quinacridone red, and I already like it so much better. Okay, I'm going to use that. Let's see. I think it'll fit as like the transition from that shadow color. a little bit muted looking still when I put it on the painting. So I'm just gonna wipe out my brush. Let's see if we can get like a slightly more intense version of that. I think this might do it. Do you like that color? And remember, I do like to dull down colors just a bit because using them full strength is often kind of like, you know, you have to save a little bit of that for later. You have to kind of have a stronger color to put down someplace else where you want it. But if you use all your strongest colors right away, you don't have any left to draw attention and create emphasis where you might otherwise have done so. So, kind of muting down just as a general rule as you start. I've always seen um, the benefit of that, I guess, but it's not like it's the only way to go. There's of course more than one way to make a painting. All right, so we've got our background color, and I think it's pretty like it. I'm going to try and clean up this shape a little bit, although love the cherries currently. I don't want to mess them up too much, but I just have to get filling. Sometimes when you really like a part of your painting, it's hard to see it go, like watching your kids grow up or something. You're like, but you're not 7. But still great. Like you're somebody else now, but remember how cool 7 was? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think about that with seeing paintings change before your eyes too. It's a similar thing. There's some qualities that they just really just live in like very early paintings that I really like, and you just can't keep them. Just can't keep them. Working through simplifying, identifying, trying all of the things. See that I have absolutely nothing painted on that ellipse. That might be next. That is still acrylic poking through. And I have an opportunity to, blocking the camera, create, again, these like pathways of certain colors. So all of these variations, I don't want to just like mix things up and forget about, their arrangement and their effect on the composition. I mean, I think variation can be very carefully used to like steer you through. So let's try it. And as I go, I am a person that likes to mix with my brush, but that does not mean I have permission to paint with muddy colors. So, if you can mix with your brush, great, mix with your brush. But if it's throwing your colors off, then stop and mix with a palette knife. And sometimes I do stop and mix with a palette knife because I need a particular color. It's not working any other way. But honestly, the brush mixing, I feel for myself, has been something that allows just a really nice organic feel to like painting and keeps me sort of inspired and also just doing things like almost with more intuition. You just kind of move your brush and you sort of know what colors are where, you think about it less. The palette knife, you're measuring, you're really making the bulk of these colors. And so it's a very different feel of the process, I think. So, every painter's got to see what works for them for sure. I would, if you are starting out, because palette knife mixing is so much cleaner just by nature of the tool, right? It doesn't hold on to any paint. You can wipe it completely clean. That's how to start. Figure out your color mixing with a palette knife. Too many things happen with brush mixing where you're like, oh, was that what I did or was that unintentional? So really figuring out color before you start brush mixing, which is unfortunately not what we usually see. Usually painters start brush mixing. All these shapes just, to me, they relate. So I'll bounce from one to the next, keep them relating. Here we have some little clementines that I haven't thought about in many moments. But that's okay. Today's been really about getting this background developed, and you can't be everywhere. We're still not finishing the background. Like I said, we're pacing this in a way that we could come back. Things are still a little bit implied. They're not too cemented in. Definitely can be developed even more. And maybe I'll just take a few of these colors into here. And I notice maybe there's just I think a similar color there would be great. I think there are little orange blobs on this teapot in many ways. Wasn't that insightful? There are little orange blobs on this teapot in many ways. So as I'm painting, the other part of my brain that's talking is saying the things. But what I mean here is that, just putting an exact copy of that pattern, that's not what we're going to enjoy looking at. And that's not probably what we're going to enjoy doing. So we can approximate and we can kind of use that same background color. Let's see if we can't bring that in a little bit, bring that into our objects, maybe in a few places. There might even be cause to see some of this reflected in our grapes here, especially toward the bottom. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a much better color above the grapes. I really like that. All right, with without the stem, these cherries are looking positively eyeball-like to me right now. But we will rescue them from that soon. Now, this is an area that, again, it was playing like underdone and it was hiding from me in its underdoneness. So we have to make sure we do enough. We don't want any underdone areas sneaking into next week's session. Oh no. Let's make sure of that. We can't have that. It's not what we want. So I think, just finishing things to the same degree, if at all possible, for logistics, that is, like where you have wet paint and how much detail is there, how much attention, focus, information, all of the above. But yeah, I'm definitely like wary of this area developing too much because I think there's so much in the description that I like that is the undeveloped stuff that I'm like, stay out of there. But that really won't work, and we really can't leave it till the end. So we have to try and find how to develop it without losing parts that are working. And that might be soft edges, that might be shapes, that might be pretty much it. That's all it's going to be. All right. Get in through here a little bit. And some of these, I want to expand the flower a little bit. So I'm kind of like leaving an unpainted section or patch next to flowers. I'm going to start to lighten this up and really get like an intense and light value, which is what I was going with over here. Saturated, light. Those are the things I'm looking for. Not the easiest things to achieve because, once you add so much white to it, you start to lose that balance. So the saturation kind of dissipates as it gets lighter. And that's why you might notice it's going just a little bit darker. All right, I am getting to the end of the session today, but I know I started a couple minutes late because, yet again, technical difficulties. But after I finish this little background up, I think we will call it a day, and I really appreciate you being here. Please do let me know if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, and if you could subscribe / comment. Amazing. Amazing what that does. What that does for me. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to finish up this little background and then I'll be back to it next